Yeah, I haven't gotten around to doing the battery yet. But I just wanted to note that there was some good news going on this week. And that was that those Menendez brothers who slaughtered their parents in the parents' living room while the parents were watching TV and eating ice cream, slaughtered them back in 1989 because they were greedy and sociopaths. And at least the parole board decided against paroling either one of these guys. But they could come back in a year or a year and a half and try to gain parole again. And their lawyer, one of their lawyers, said, well, they'll be paroled eventually. I wouldn't bet the farm on that. There's still a lot of outrage. First of all, they never should have been allowed to have parole, and they weren't supposed to have parole in the first place when they were charged. Well, actually, they were guilty of killing their parents, and back in 1989, and they basically the trial of the two brothers was about what punishment they should get, whether they should get the death penalty or whether they should get life without parole. And the attorney then, the despicable Leslie Abramson, pulled the abuse excuse out of her backside, literally made it up. There was never any evidence whatsoever that their parents ever in any way abused those brothers. But she did that as a tactic, and it's a despicable tactic, to put the victims on trial and make the murderers the victims. It's one of the most despicable tactics known to American legal system. And the abuse excuse was actually coined by none other than Alan Dershowitz, and he wrote a book about it not long after the Menendez trials. And he was not happy with this tactic of defense attorneys to do what Leslie Abramson did. Now, anybody who has any knowledge of this case knows that the Menendez brothers killed their parents for the money. Their father was a highly driven, very ambitious, some would say ruthless, not really lovable individual, but he was a music industry executive, who lived in a mansion with his longtime wife, Kitty, whom he met in college in Illinois, I believe it was. And they had all this money. Their fortune was estimated to be around $10 million to $12 million in 1989 dollars. But they had this lifestyle, and the brothers were, they were spoiled. Let's face it, they were spoiled rotten. They felt entitled, but the dad, his big mistake was being very hard on the boys. There was no evidence he ever abused them physically or sexually. But he was pretty much a tough taskmaster. He wanted his sons to be like him, to have ambition, to be a millionaire by the age of 30, which is what Jose Menendez did. To be a success. Although, as I remember, and this, this is going back 36 years since the murders, but Jose Menendez wanted his sons to go to Princeton, an Ivy League school, and he had at least one, he had ambitions for one of them at least to be a tennis pro. Well, they didn't really measure up to anything. He was a type A. Jose Menendez was a type A personality to the nth degree, and the sons were type Z. They were totally useless. They were aimless and just spoiled rotten. And he was very disappointed in them. And as I remember, there was a fear on the part of the boys they were going to be disinherited by their dad. Their dad had every right. Their dad and their mother had every right to disinherit him. They had every right to do that. Then the boys, if they hadn't been so consumed by greed and entitlement, they could have gone out and proved their dad wrong and actually have succeeded on their own. And maybe everybody would have gotten along, everybody would have reconciled and all that, and we wouldn't hear about this case. But no, the brothers thought they were going to lose that inheritance. And by God, they plotted to annihilate their parents while their parents were in the living room watching TV and eating ice cream and killing them gangland style. And they resented their dad, but their mother was there to witness it, so she had to go. And that was bad enough. All of that was bad enough. But then, and then I think one of the brothers, when the police came upon the scene, he didn't really give a shit about anything about the parents. He just wanted to go get his tennis rackets. That's the kind of crap they turned out to be. They proved their dad right. They proved their dad right every step of the way. But their behavior after the murders, and they had lied repeatedly to officials, is they went out and they got that money and they squandered it. They squandered it on new cars, expensive cars. They bought Rolex watches. They bought condos, as I remember, and they had some failed business ventures they were dabbling in. They weren't grieving. They weren't acting like a pair of abused kids. They couldn't take it anymore. No, they took it. They took millions of dollars and they squandered lots of it. And whatever was left over, attorneys like Leslie Abramson took it. So they went and killed them for the money. That's always been the case. So the abuse thing was a trumped up deal to keep the boys from being executed at San Quentin. And I'm not a fan of the death penalty, but you know what? I wouldn't grieve if these guys had gotten their reward that way. I wouldn't be crying over it. And that was another thing. The most disgusting thing about those trials was Abramson coaching those murderers to cry about the abuse and just shedding all these crocodile tears. The only thing they were crying about is they got caught. That's the only thing. They didn't give a damn about anything else. But anyway, they had life without parole, and then somewhere along the way, the courts decided, well, yeah, they could be eligible for parole, but nobody was buying what they were trying to sell. It's very shameful. Very, very shameful. that anybody could possibly believe these guys were anything other than greedy sociopaths. And I guess there's a Netflix thing out, documentary or fictional show, whatever, because I don't get Netflix, so I don't watch it. But they were trying to, they were trying to change history, trying to rewrite history, trying to, I can't even think of the word now, but they were trying to rewrite it and trying to make it look like, well, these guys really were abused. I mean, it doesn't even pass the smell test. Okay, they never were. And there was never any, let's put it this way, that was never proven at all. There was no evidence ever that they were abused at all. But there was some talk or some articles that were talking about how younger people thought these criminals, these murderers, should be given a second chance, and there's supposed to be this groundswell of letting them out of prison. Not happening. I don't think that's ever going to happen. The only way they'll get out is in pine boxes, because there would be outrage. And Gavin Newsom better not be even entertaining the thought of letting them out. That's the end of his career, if he even thinks about doing that. So he better knock that shit off too, because there's no real groundswell to allow these murderers back in society. They don't deserve to be out. They've just been pulling a con all these years, thanks to their filthy lawyer back in the trials. But they weren't alone. They were not alone in trying to con the public. Another murderer, and I've talked about all these people anyway before, and Dana Ewell was another one, but he was allegedly much smarter than the Menendez brothers, because he wasn't there when his family was annihilated back in the early 90s in Fresno, California. And so he was up hundreds of miles away with his girlfriend after his family and the girlfriend's family had dinner together. And then the mother and daughter drove home, and the dad flew down to Fresno. The dad had a business connected to small airplanes. He also was involved in agriculture. He was a very rich man. He was so-called self-made, very driven, like Jose Menendez, a tough customer, and unfortunately, he and his wife had this monster of a son named Dana. And Dana hired a friend of his in college who was from the wrong side of the tracks. He hired that guy to kill the family and do that, and Dana would have this alibi that he couldn't have done the crimes because he was hundreds of miles away with his girlfriend. And the thing of it is, for all the alleged IQ that Dana Ewell had, he was actually an idiot, because one of the big things, one of the keys evidence that they had there was that this Radovich, who was his friend that he hired to kill the family, he went, Joel Radovich, or whatever it was, he had access to the ammunition in the house. Well, right there, that nailed good old Dana, because they traced that ammunition to Dale Ewell. Not smart. And then furthermore, old Dana, he was going to be disinherited. His dad was going to disinherit him because he gave an interview with the Los Angeles Times, and I remember seeing a picture. I remember seeing that very article where they showed him in front of a small airplane with his arms folded like he meant business. But that business that his dad did, he took credit for. And when the dad found out about that, he was pissed off. So was the mother. They were pissed off. And they said, as I remember, told him that once he was finished with college, he was on his own. He was not going to he was not going to be helped anymore. And Dana was afraid he was going to be cut out of the will. So he had the family killed. And the funny thing was, the hilarious part of it was that he, oh crap, he went to the reading of the will, and he got upset when he found out his dad made it to where Dana could not inherit his share of the estate until he was 35 years old, and he was 21 at the time of the murders. I laughed my ass off when I heard that. I thought that was funny as hell. And of course he ended up with Zip, and the brothers, Dale Ewell's brothers, inherited the estate. But, you know, and this guy has the nerve. He like the Menendezes, because none of them have anything to look forward to, but they're all real religious now. And he's real religious, Dana, but he's trying to appeal, still trying to go through the courts. And this was written, let's see, in June 12th, I don't know. Let's see, Dana Ewell. He is not 31. I was just thinking. He is not. This is a very old article. But he tried to appeal his case, and of course he lost. This is a very old article here. Probably from, well, let's see, he was born in 1971, so this is probably around 2002 when that was written. But he had embraced God, just like the Menendezes. But there are all kinds of cases like this in the history of American jurisprudence, in the history of American crime. You get these rich kids, and they don't want to work. They want to be able to squander their parents' money, and if they don't get their way, they kill the parents. So the moral of the story is, in the case of Dana Ewell, or in the case of Dale Ewell and his family, in the case of Jose and Kitty Menendez, in the case of Franklin Bradshaw, the oddball Salt Lake City millionaire who was murdered by his grandson at the request of his daughter, Frances Schroeder. They have this entitlement, and the moral of the story is, if you're disappointed in your kids and you're rich, don't tell them don't make a threat, idle or otherwise, that you're going to disinherit. Because that's signing your death warrant. And that's what happened here in all three of those cases and many other cases involving the rich. Don't do it. Just keep a low profile. But anyway, I was happy that the Menendezes were denied, the Menendez brothers were denied parole, and hopefully they can stick to their guns, and Gavin Newsom should not be saying a damned word about it. Be shutting up. Because they're not popular. This is not a cause celeb that anybody should be embracing, because though that was a total phony baloney thing of abuse. So anyway, on that note, I'm going to call it good.